And so the listening is sort of the preparation for speaking. Hi, Steve Kaufman here. And today I want to talk a little bit about listening, why you should listen before you speak in language learning. And maybe that's a lesson for life. Make sure your mind is open and that you're listening before you just say whatever you want to say. Remember, if you enjoy these videos, please subscribe, click on the bell for notifications. And if you follow me on a podcast service, please leave a comment. So if you follow me here, you know that I believe in the power of input. I believe in Stephen Krashen, that we learn from meaningful messages. We learn when we're listening to a language and we hear things that are somehow compelling for us. That way we learn. And of course, in history, long before we had. So input can be listening and it can be reading. Those are the two ways in which the language, which we don't have inside us, can come into our brain. We can develop new language habits based on this stimulus from the language that we receive in listening or reading. And but listening, obviously historically precedes reading. Humans were communicating orally long before we had any writing systems. People learned things by listening to the elders or listening to experts and so forth. So listening has been around for a long time. So how do we listen to learn languages? In my own case, listening is my favorite activity because it's so easy to do. And I think that's important. We can't force ourselves to do things all the time that we find difficult. We don't want to be pushing against, too much resistance. Listening is something that I can do first thing in the morning while doing my exercises. I can do it while preparing breakfast. I can do it while in the car. And I do a lot of it, probably more than any other activity. But listening implies some degree of understanding, or at least an attempt at understanding. Otherwise, we just hear something. So we just hear noise. We just hear a language, and there's nothing there that we understand. I don't think that's very effective for language learning. So I always make a point of listening to something where I have access to a transcript. At a very early stage in my language learning, I rely on going over the transcript because it is just noise when I start. And I go through the transcript and I look up words in link and I review the words and I listen again and I listen to the whole lesson again, and gradually sort of the fog lifts. It's like the jigsaw puzzle. As more pieces fall into place, we start to notice some other things. But always the listening is the easiest thing to do, and it also triggers my reading, where I find it easier to sort of define the words that I'm hearing. If I just rely on my listening, I can't really grab what those words are. So it's very much a combination of listening and reading, but most of the time is spent listening. Now, when we listen, we aren't, and here I want to point out some things that I think experienced, at least I shouldn't say that, but in my own case, I know that I will continue not understanding for a long time. It doesn't bother me. So we listen, we don't fully understand, but we are understanding some things. And so the language is washing over us. We are listening. We're not just hearing the language. We are listening. We're grabbing things here and there. And when we listen a second time, we notice some other things. So I combine it with listening, but the listening itself, which is so easy to do, is also helping the language to wash over my brain. And I do pick out certain things every time I listen. Now, the other thing about listening is I like listening while doing other tasks, because I actually, surprisingly, find it easier to concentrate. Start off by saying we can't concentrate 100%. When we are listening to anything, let alone in a foreign language where it requires a little more concentration to understand what's being said, to sort of seize upon those things that we do understand and try to fill in some things that we don't yet understand and guess what they mean. And so all of this stuff requires a fair amount of concentration, but you can't be concentrating the whole time. If I sit down to deliberately listen, I find it more difficult. My mind is more likely to wander for some reason. On the other hand, if I'm driving, if I'm doing the dishes, if I'm exercising, I'm not worried about when my mind wanders. I'm assuming that my mind is going to wander. And for some reason, I'm able to better concentrate. Obviously, exercising is more difficult, but doing the dishes, I'm able to concentrate. And if it's the mini stories where there's a lot of repetition, I start noticing certain structures that I didn't notice before. If it's more advanced content in languages that I speak, say, relatively well, I'm more focused on the meaning. I don't listen to those things so often, but all of this is helping the language sort of wash over my brain. And while we do this, and especially if we combine it with reading, we are building up our capability to speak. But the listening especially starts certain phrases sort of ringing in our brains, and we get to a point where we want to try these out. We may use them wrong, we may fall flat in our face, but we build up this well of things that we want to say in the language because we've been listening a lot. And so the listening is sort of the preparation for speaking. And it's not only sort of the easiest activity to do, it's very easy to find an hour a day to listen, 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there. You put together an hour. Hopefully that triggers you to go and read the same content if you have access to the transcript. So it's a very easy activity to do. It's a fun activity. Listening comprehension is also a major goal in language learning, so that the activity becomes the goal. Not the medium is the message, but the activity of learning is the goal itself. Because if we can achieve a high degree of listening comprehension, we now have access to so much more in the language that we can use to improve. This could be simply having meaningful conversations with people because we understand more of what they're saying. It's very frustrating to be in a conversation with someone where you struggle to say something and then you don't understand what they're saying back to you. If we have good listening comprehension, we can listen to podcasts, we can watch Netflix films or series. So the listening comprehension, which we achieve through lots of listening, is not only the main activity, it becomes the goal because you get a sort of a multiplying effect. Once you achieve a certain level of listening comprehension, you can listen to more compelling material, which increases your ability to understand your listening comprehension. And it just gets you on a sort of gives you momentum in your language learning that will eventually lead to better fluency. So once you have enough of that comprehension and you have taken advantage of your listening comprehension to, access all of the kind of content that's available on the internet, listening and hopefully reading and say looking up words on Link or wherever, once you are, headed in that direction, the speaking will come. And so that's why I always say, listen before you speak. That's not to say you can't start speaking whenever you want, but make sure that even as you start speaking, put a lot of emphasis on listening. Because if you're not very, at an early stage, if your comprehension isn't very well developed and you're struggling to say something, you're going to be mostly focusing on trying to say what it is you have to say. Whereas if you're focusing enough time on listening, you're building up that listening comprehension and eventually you'll end up speaking better. So I just wanted to make that point about listening, somewhat similar to the discussion I had in French a couple of weeks ago. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.